Welcome to another Milepost of the V-Twin Life. We talk motorcycles powered by those V-Twins, why we enjoy it, what they mean to us, and just why we enjoy the open road. V-Twin Life is brought to you by CrashIncClothing.com, also known as Crash Inc. on the World Wide Web. Man, Brad has sold a lot of stuff. You want to get some merchandise, you want to get parts, you want to upgrade stuff on your bike. He is a dealer for a lot of great companies, so check out CrashIncClothing.com and see what they got for you. Now, we got Wild Ass. You want to add some comfort to your ass? Man, Wild Ass has got you covered. They've got something you like. Use that promo code DWoods. Get yourself free shipping and put that ass in comfort. Can't forget Custom Dynamics, leading the world in LED lighting and LED technology. Man, these got some great stuff. You want to light up your life at nighttime? You want to be seen during the day? Hey, check out Custom Dynamics. Can't forget Lexan. These guys got some great comm units. I just got the new G16s. Man, you want to talk quality? These things are awesome. Loudspeakers, plus they got some air pumps, small ones you keep in your bike. They're ready to go. So check out Lexan. So now, let's get to another milepost of the V-Twin Life. Yeah, what is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the V-Twin Life. I know I've been on hiatus for a little bit, but we're back tonight. Milepost 139 with, you got to agree with the, title, this, the Legend Hyde. Not many people sign up to do a 10,000 mile endurance ride, but let alone do it on a hardtail is some whole next level of riding. So I've been looking forward to this since August. So we'll welcome Don Hyde back to the V-Twin Life. So, hey, thanks for coming back on, hanging out tonight there, Hyde.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this, following the whole hook of hay with everybody. And, anybody that does it they're an absolute legend. And I know there's some other people that would agree. I think there needs to be a little asterisk next to your name that says I'm certified crazy, because I'm going to do this on a Panhead, on a hardtail, no less. But holy crap, man. And congratulations on finishing. I know it's been a work in progress for you. We can dive into that whole story, but congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a lot better being on this side of it, where it's not the hypothetical anymore. We can finally check that box and got that old girl across the finish line. I'm pretty happy with that.
Oh, it is pretty awesome. Now, I know this was, I guess you say third time's a charm.
Yeah. That was kind of our motto this time, third time's a charm. And it just felt like that way from start to finish. It was definitely had a cosmic feeling of swimming with the stream this time. Everything, all the dice aligned for us and came up a winning combination. So that was great.
Swimming through the hurricane?
3 times. We hit that bitch 3 times. Hurricane Debbie. We hit the dirty side of it 3 times. That was an epic way to start that thing.
Because now, see, you first started this dream. So, how did this whole come apart with, you wanting to do this on a hardtail? Because this, people listening, this wasn't your first attempt at doing the Hoka on your Panhead.
Yeah, this was the 3rd time. I was inspired by several people at the beginning of this process, and Wright was a big influence on me. He had ridden the previous Hoka in 2018 as his first Hoka, I think, and when he and I had a chance to talk before the 2020, and I had planned on applying for it, and I just, by that stage of the game, I had a relationship with that Panhead, and the Panhead had been built to ride. It's really, that motorcycle is really Johnny Cash's Cadillac. It's got a lot of, it was built to ride from the beginning. It's a stock Panhead. It's 74 cubic inch Panhead. It's not, there's nothing stroked. It's just a stock Panhead. But outside of that, the engine, the transmission, and the frame being original when I first built it, or we first built it, everything else on it is just put on it to ride, and it really was a 6-year journey to get the combination right, so that it could have the endurance to do something like a Hoka. I'd done a lot of long distance rides on that motorcycle, but nothing with the grueling demands that Hoka comes with.
Well, understandable. Yeah, because I mean, I couldn't fathom doing it on a hardtail. I mean, let alone signing up, and completing the challenge. But on a, that vintage is a whole nother story. And following along, I remember at the end, you made a list of everything. Like this year, the stuff you had to replace, the things that broke. It's like, holy God, it was, you were, tinkering with stuff. It seemed almost every night, keeping yourself going. Adjusting little things and making fixes, but continuing and pushing on.
Yeah, it was. It was a unique Hoka on multiple levels. The demand of the route. I mean, this was by far the toughest route that I've ridden in. I don't, and most riders, most Hoka riders, seem to agree with that assessment. That it was a really tough route, and if 2022 was the year of the animal, because we just had some epic stretches through animal infested places in 22. A lot of riders colliding with a lot of animals throughout that. Okay, this was the year of the rain. I mean, out of the time that I spent on the road, 4/5 of it were in solid rain. Beginning in Florida. I mean, we were 1,400 miles under our ass by the time we got out of Florida, let alone making it the rest of the way to Canada and through Canada and Alaska. But that stretch through Florida was just torrential downpour. I mean, it was just crazy. So between that and the mechanics challenges, that's a given on that motorcycle. That's part of the deal. That's part of the challenge for me was it was as much a mechanics challenge as it was a riding challenge. And that's what I loved about it. That was sort of the goal with riding the Panhead for Hoka. It was just really an ultimate challenge for rider and ultimate challenge for machine in my mind.
Did you ever have like a little voice, like the professional side of you with, your career and your job, like in your ear saying, are you crazy for attempting this on on the Panhead, going to abuse yourself and, the whole adventure, you kind of almost in your own ear at times?
I think that's a pretty common experience for Hoka in general. I don't think anybody rides Hoka without that thought occurring to them a few times, because it's just so technically challenging. And the amount of hours that you're spending on the road, and some of the roads that we ride on, virtually all the roads that we ride on in Hoka are just that kind of challenge. It doesn't matter how accomplished you are as a rider. Hoka will, stretch the limits of your technical riding ability. There will be places where that thought occurs to you that like, oh man, what am I doing here? There definitely were some spots this Hoka more so than any other I've ridden in that occurred. That stretch through Canada was no joke. I mean, that Alcan Highway stretch was just a whole new level of insane. So, and it's hauntingly lonely out there in those stretches of road. I mean, you're really on your own, and what you bring with you is what you're going to have to do it with. So there were many times where that thought occurred to me.
I'd heard that from a few other individuals also talking about that stretch it was brutal.
Yeah, it was it was just an amazing challenge navigating Yukon territory, for example, and maybe for another 40 or 50 miles into Alaska. That road was just a whole new level of insane. There were, 30 to 60, 80-mile stretches of just washboard constantly and potholes you could sleep in. And you add some rain on top of that, and you really got a mix for insanity level stuff.
Yeah, I could imagine what going through that, just some seriously next level insanity and abusing yourself just because of road conditions and whatnot are not the most friendly to the motorcycle.
I mean, it wasn't all that though. I mean, it was just stunningly beautiful too. I mean, I just I loved it. I mean, it was great when it wasn't hurting. It was awesome.
Dylan had a great question. He goes, what tire pressure are you running in the rear?
I actually run 38 pounds in the rear no matter what. And that's so I can get the life out of the tire that I need. I used to run a softer compound tire, but now I run a Dunlop American Elite on the front and rear, and it tends to last longer. But especially for Hokahay, I really didn't want to have to change tires during Hokahay. I came prepared to do that, but so I run 38 pounds. It'd be a lot more comfortable ride if I, bring that down. If you could run at 28 or 32 pounds, that would certainly make the ride a whole lot more comfortable on a rigid frame bike. But I was kind of trying to get some extra miles out of those tires without having to change them.
Gotcha. Yeah, Dylan was saying he runs 15 to 20 on his hardtail.
Yeah, I mean, it's I kind of ended up running low tire pressure, like 22 on my front tire, because I had a slow leak that surfaced in the Yukon territory, and I didn't have I couldn't find a replacement tube or a replacement tire up there. And my parts truck I didn't have my parts truck in Canada. So I did have some help with tools. I had a parts truck through Canada that was able to provide tools, but all my parts that I brought with me from Texas were hemmed up in Montana. So fortunately, that front tire just ended up being sort of a ball valve leak that it dropped the pressure down to 22 pounds and then didn't seem to go below that.
That's good, at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, Salty Badger, Greg, what was your worst mechanical issue you had on the ride?
By far the worst, it depends on what you're talking about comfort wise, but I lost my front brakes 2 days from the finish line, and I lost my front suspension because I have a wide glide front end on that bike. So I have front suspension, but I lost that in Mississippi, really. So I didn't have any. So it was a rigid frame, true rigid frame from Mississippi on. But it was rigid frame all the way through, but I didn't have a front suspension either after Mississippi. But by far the mechanical problem that gave me the most fits over and over again was the clutch. I had a lot of clutch problems. I still haven't torn the bike down yet for the rebuild. I'm in the process of getting parts for rebuilding the Panhead, but I'm really anxious to get in that transmission and see what went wrong with the clutch. I had to limp through kind of in a weird way. I didn't want to completely tear it apart on the road because I could have easily gotten into I didn't know what the problem was, so I could have gotten into something that once I got it apart, I couldn't get it back together. And I figured a way to limp by, and I would limp by for a day or two. And the way, what the problem was, it's a foot clutch that motorcycle's got a foot clutch on a so-called suicide clutch. And that clutch is on a open primary dry clutch system. So the push rod that pushes the pressure plate out and the throw-out bearing system, something was screwed up in there, and it was the adjuster screw was rubbing on something inside. It was wearing that part down, and I would lose my clutch. It would just stick, and I wouldn't be able to shift gears or clutch at all. And I figured out that if I sacrificed that adjuster screw a little at a time, I literally carried a file around with me, and every 2 days I would file the end of that adjuster screw off, put it all back together, and it would buy me another day or two.
Oh, damn.
And then I was just hoping that that adjuster screw would last, because it's a proprietary part that's got a Baker transmission in it. So fortunately, it made it through. But I can't wait to break open the transmission and see what it was that went wrong. I think it was a throw-out bearing that probably went bad in it, but we'll see.
So is that a Baker 6-speed?
What's that?
Was that a Baker 6-speed you're running?
Yeah, it's a Baker Frankentranny.
Nice.
I ran Hoka 2020. I made it halfway through, but I had the original transmission in it, a 4-speed transmission. On that transmission, on the Panhead, you can get the sweet spots maybe 75 miles an hour, 70 to 75 miles an hour. Running long stretches much faster than that really puts a lot of strain on a lot of things. So one change I made for the 2022 Hoka was to put that Frankentranny in. That's the Baker 6-into-4. And that was really nice because it's the same as the 4-speed transmission. Basically, the 5th gear in that transmission is the same as the 4th gear on the original Harley transmission, but it's got that 6th gear that's a 0.86-to-1 ratio gear, and it gives you an overdrive gear basically. So I could run comfortably on that bike with a stock engine at 80 miles an hour, 75 to 80 miles an hour. And for Hoka, that's a game changer. I mean, that's really, really, really helpful. Not very often you're able to run 80 miles an hour on a lot of the roads we run on, but when you have it, that's great. I didn't have it the last 2 days. The last 2 days, that clutch problem just basically, I lost that overdrive gear. So basically the last 2 days, I think, of Hoka, I was, basically running exact same as I would from a 4-speed transmission.
Yeah, so that's 6th gear, give you, bring your RPMs down just a wee bit, kind of ease up the pressure on the engine.
Yeah, it brings it down at highway speed. It brings it down 300 RPM, and it makes a lot of difference. Makes a lot of difference. Yeah. And then the top end, I also adjusted the sprocket a little bit, so I got a 13-tooth sprocket on the front. That helps. So you run into a limit there with how much power you can get to the rear wheel, how much top end you can get to the rear wheel with the horsepower and the torque you're working with from the engine. Because a stock engine, there's just only so much you're going to get out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and try not to go overboard building it where you can still have some of that longevity to, keep you going for a while and not sacrifice the engine on an RPM wise and make it want to, leave the chat and go somewhere else.
Yeah, if it were a stroked engine or something like that, I don't think it could do Hoka. I mean, if you really tried to squeeze all the power you could by stroking the engine or messing with the original manufacturer specs on the engine, I just don't think it would have the endurance to be able to do it. It's a bit of a roll of the dice. I mean, obviously, it took 3 times to do it. Even with, everything rebuilt every time. I mean, those were brand new rebuilds on the engine each time. So it was a bit of a roll of the dice no matter what.
Well, it's fair to say every time, it's a bit of an education. You're learning as you go. It's okay. Well, this didn't work. Okay, what can I fix? And you know, to get yourself to that third time's a charm, I'm gonna cross the finish line, and you adapt and overcome and figure out the kinks and make it work.
Yep. That was what it was all about. It was just it took enough miles on that motorcycle and enough tries to go through all the possible scenarios of stuff breaking down. In 2020, I lost my charging system. That's what tripped me up 20, and the solution to that ended up being great. I have a true alternator on that Panhead that's uh, made from a Denso tractor alternator, and it puts out enough amps that I don't need a lot of power output on that bike because the ignition runs off a magneto, but I need accessory lights. You need that on Hoka Hay. It's kind of tough to do it without it. Plus some extras, ability to charge my phone and my lights not going out and stuff like that.
Yeah, understandable. I mean, I learned that, getting into enjoying, doing the long distance, the endurance riding and challenging when I, started the whole Monsters Over Mountains, and I rode with Shell Feddersen on, it would have been last year's, and going up through Montana, and she got up next to me and hit her Denali's, and all of a sudden it's like daytime. It's like, I'm running the Custom Dynamics Pro Beam lineup with their headlights, and it's like, Jesus, it's like I don't even got my lights on. It's like, okay, this is an education. I need more lights. It's time to, brighten my scenario, so to speak. And it's all those little things you learn. And lighting is a huge part, especially if you really want to push the envelope and doing these kind of challenges and whatnot, because you're going to be riding it in darkness. And man, the more you can see, the safer you're going to be. And I think on the flip side is the more lights you have in the daytime, you're going to be seen also. And it's a great
Right.
safety factor. And that's, well, at least in my opinion, it's kind of another way I see it.
No doubt. I mean, that was another mechanical challenges because my mounts for my accessory lights, Mississippi broke those. So a lot happened in Mississippi. I'm going to tell you what, anybody on this thing from Mississippi, those roads were no joke right there from this early on in the ride. There were some states that were just epically challenging from how rough the roads were. Mississippi was rough. Oklahoma was pretty brutal. There were some stretches in Wyoming, Montana, were pretty brutal. And I remember posting something about how rough the roads were up to that point. And one of my brothers riding that had already made it into Alaska at that point warned me that it was a drop in the bucket compared to what I was facing in Canada. And he was right. Yeah, he was right.
I think John Grice had a great question, but I'm going to change one of his words so a lot of us understand that the Hoka Hay it's not a race, it's a challenge. So if you change a little bit, what stretch of the challenge was the hardest for you or on you?
I think there's probably two answers to that. One is, I'll tell you, the psychological challenge earlier on, like up to the first checkpoint in Rogers, Arkansas, and then shortly after that first checkpoint, moving toward the second checkpoint in Wyoming. That stretch really was psychologically devastating because, that was the downside to the third time is the charm, because psychologically, you're you're swinging for the fences each time, right? A lot of people are, invested. They want to see the Panhead cross the finish line, but if each time you break down, you put a lot of psychological pressure on yourself to not fail. The worry of failing on something like that can wear on you a little bit. And that stretch right there just was psychologically wicked, because I started to think in that stretch, I'm screwed again. My clutch was really giving me a lot of fits. I hadn't figured out the solution at that point. I'd lost my front suspension. I'm blowing fork oil all over the place, but at some point in New Mexico, I had the thought, well, I started accounting for the stuff that was still working, and all the core things that needed to work on the motorcycle were doing really well. The engine was doing great. I was really getting great gas mileage. I had a lot of, support along the way. A lot of people were really very effective at cheering me on, and so that helped. Physically, that stretch in the Yukon Territory was just horrendous. Hokahe can be pretty challenging from a navigation standpoint because of all the turns, and getting lost is always part of the equation. And there was sure some of that, up till the Canadian border. But once you cross the Canadian border, there weren't a lot of turns to be had. Once you got on that Alcan Highway, that's where you were going to stay. There weren't a lot of excursions away from that road to be had. So the mission was pretty straightforward, but it was so physically challenging. I mean, it was just wickedly brutal. But some of the elevations and mountain ranges, I think we did 7 transits through the Rockies, between the U.S. Rockies and the Canadian Rockies. So the elevation changes, and some of the roads that were just unimproved roads going up, at big elevation, no guardrails, sheer drop-offs in the rain. I don't like heights very much. I don't know about y'all, but some of that stuff had an extreme amount of pucker factor to it, quite a bit. So physically, that stretch in Canada was just brutal. But, once I crossed Alaska, about 30, 40 miles into Alaska, maybe 50 miles, seemed less than 100 anyway, that road improved so much. It was so nice. We still had a lot of miles ahead of us because, that Alaska is a big ass state. Yeah. Going up the Fairbanks and then all the way back down to Homer. It was still a lot of miles in that stretch, but the road was beautiful. I mean, I don't know if the road was that beautiful or it was just so much better than what we had been on the previous, 5 or 6 days, but it was such a dramatic improvement that it felt awesome. But that's where my clutch completely fell apart. My clutch just completely went to shit, and I lost my 6th gear just as I was coming into Fairbanks. So it really wasn't until the last day when I got the bike started and I was on the road and I had my routine down for babying the clutch a little bit. It was the first thought I had at that stage of the game that we could make it to the finish line. Because literally up until that last day, I had no idea if we could make it to the finish line. And the closer I got, the more weight I felt on my shoulders that, how devastating it'd be to have to give up at this point,
Oh,
Let
for
alone
sure.
damage you.
So now, with all the mountain passes, I mean, going through all the Rockies, being carbureted, did you have much air fuel mixture problems with the elevation?
I'll tell you, that was kind of another tricky deal. I put a new carburetor on the bike literally the week before I loaded the bike up to take it to Florida. I put a Mikuni HS40 carburetor on it, and I didn't have time to do any trial runs on that bike with that new carburetor on it. Not at all. I mean, I jetted it, I adjusted it, and the adjustment had 10 miles on it. When I left for Hokahay out of Daytona, that was my test ride on that carburetor.
Jesus.
So it was, that was just a complete roll of the dice, but it ended up being a very fortunate roll of the dice because that carburetor was awesome. I mean, my previous carburetor, I would get 150 miles on a tank of gas, which is that's kind of the lower limit of being able to ride Hokahay, because you got stretches where you may need, you may have that between gas stops. And I pulled into the first gas station at 140 or 150 miles after starting the ride. And I put 3 gallons of gas in the tank. And I said, that's not right. Something's not right there. And then I had a stretch later on where I got hemmed up, no access to gas, and I miscalculated, and I was on the road like 160, 170 miles. And I just knew any mile I was running out of gas. I knew it, any mile. And I rolled into a gas station and literally ran out of gas pulling into the driveway of that gas station with 216 miles on that gas tank. And
damn,
unbelievable. And that it ended up just it was a lifesaver in Canada, because if I'd have been stuck with the previous carburetor in Canada, 150 miles just wouldn't have cut it. And some of those gas stations up there, you rolled in at 10 o'clock at night, you weren't getting gas till 7 or 8 in the morning because it was just closed, and closed means closed. If you made it to the gas station. So it ended up being awesome. That carburetor was one of the most fortunate things I did to that bike.
Sounds like it. So Sensor Pendants had a great one. If Hyde would do it for a 4th time, what would you do differently?
I don't know that I would do a whole lot differently. I think I have every time I do something like this and something breaks on that bike or something messes up on that bike, my mindset is long distance riding on that motorcycle. So I'm trying to keep that motorcycle as simple as possible and as long lasting as possible. And everything that's on it is on it with that in mind. I am going to put new brakes on it. I'm going to put professional mechanical brakes on it. This time I had different brakes on it before, and they were great. But I think I'm going to upgrade my brakes. I am rebuilding my front suspension on the wide glide front end. I'm not changing a whole lot outside of that. I mean, the engine, the transmission, the primary drive, completely the right setup. Charging system, completely the right setup. The carburetor, perfect. So everything on that motorcycle is set up, about as ideal as it could be set up at this stage of the game. I don't know that I would change a whole lot at this stage of the game. The next time we're not going to have to cross the border. So my parts truck situation would be a whole lot better than what we contended with this time. Speaking of which, I think I might have Grizz on here. Grizz, stepped up and pinch hit out of Alberta, Canada to be my parts truck guy all the way to Homer on a moment's notice. When my parts truck got hemmed up at the Canadian border and couldn't pass through Montana, Grizz kind of just said, "Hey, brother, I'll follow you." And
that's awesome.
He
The
got on the
brotherhood that
road.
you.
Yeah, he has a pretty robust set of tools. He's a mechanic himself, and he threw himself, his wife, and their dog William into his wife Connie. All three of them got in a van and they took off for Homer, Alaska. So my few breakdowns, he was there to show up and help me out. Hookah doesn't allow you to have a chase vehicle, but they did pass a rule for us after the 2020 challenge that allowed anyone to have a parts truck if you're on a vintage bike. And so that ended up being, the game. That's a game changer. Without that, I don't think it's a doable adventure.
Now, I'd heard through, secondhand that you didn't want that parts truck running close to you, though. You wanted a very significant gap between you and where that truck was because you wanted to do as much as you could on your own. Is that true?
Yeah, when they first came to me after the 2020 challenge with the struggles we had trying to get a replacement part for that failed charging system, the Hookah board passed. They initially came to me and said that they had passed a rule to allow a chase vehicle for anyone on a vintage bike. And I encouraged them to not do that. I encouraged them to not throw away the spirit of Hookah with that. I wouldn't have thrown it away. That's not the right terminology there, but I encouraged them to not go that far, that in order to preserve the spirit of Hookah and the personal challenge that represents, you don't really want a chase vehicle. It's just not, it would take away from the experience, I think, no matter what you're riding. If you got to have a chase vehicle, you shouldn't be riding something that needs a chase vehicle. But all I needed was parts. If I could have a parts truck that could be within hours of me, then that resolves and solves a disadvantage for anybody riding a vintage bike. And the disadvantage is not having access to parts or a dealership that could fix your bike when you're on the road, So
Yeah.
All I needed was parts. So my parts truck guy, I asked them to just go to checkpoints. So what they did was, as I was on the road, the parts truck just started heading to the next checkpoint. And when I broke down between Florida and Montana, I mean, there were times I waited 30 minutes for a parts truck, and there were times where I waited 8 hours for a parts truck. Just depends on where it was at. I needed a parts truck at the second checkpoint in Wyoming, or the third checkpoint in Wyoming at Flaming Gorge Harley in Wyoming. And that took 8 hours, for him to get to me to get the parts I needed so I could get on the road the next morning. And, that's fine by me. My making it in 10 days was not my mission on that bike. That was just crossing the finish line on that bike was my mission,
Yeah. What's your most memorable part of riding the 24?
Um, I think by far, maybe this goes to a previous question. What was the toughest mechanical thing? The thing that gave me the fits the most throughout the ride was the clutch. But the biggest challenge was my handlebars broke, right? So I was in Alberta, Canada. They had that big fire in Banff, Jasper area that had gone on just before we left for Hokahay. And we had a detour around there, and we were in a national park going around Jasper. And I hit that national park riding between 10 o'clock and midnight. And dark, dark, dark. I think it was a new moon or something. I don't remember seeing any moon. And it was just crazy dark. Well, my handlebars broke clean in half, right in between the risers. And, it had been something that had been trying to fail since Mississippi, but they just broke clean in half. So I found myself riding with my right handlebar and my accelerator in my lap. And
Jesus.
and so about that was about 200 miles worth of riding.
Damn.
And I just, if Grizz is on here, that's how I got connected to this guy, because I put the word out that, hey, my handlebars are broke. I'm taking a flyer. There's no way I could rode the Alcan. It just wouldn't have been doable. And somehow I got connected to Grizz, who had a guy who knew a guy, and literally they were 45 miles away from where I was. And the next day, in driving rain, I was able to make it to their motorcycle shop, Ugly But Honest Motorcycles in
What a name.
in Spruce Grove, Alberta, Canada. Those guys were just amazing. I rolled into that motorcycle shop an hour before they closed. They descended 3 guys on that motorcycle, replaced my handlebars, just ran the wiring external, put everything back in place. And by the next morning, I was back on the road, back where I left the route. That's the set of handlebars that are on the bike right now. I run 18-inch ape hangers on that thing on purpose, but these were 16s, I think. And it saved the day because, those handlebars just broke clean in half.
That's crazy. I've heard, some people talk about, doing this challenge, finding themselves, whether supernatural experiences and whatnot. Did you find that this year when you completed it, making the whole challenge?
Absolutely. I'll tell you, this motorcycle, that motorcycle is more than a motorcycle to me. It represents many relationships that are extremely important to me. And the man that helped me build that motorcycle is the guy I bought it from in the first place as a basket case. And when I bought it from him, he and I just kind of hit it off. And he ended up becoming my best friend in the world. Aside from my blood brother, he is the best friend I have on the planet. And he and I spent countless hours building that motorcycle. When it was first built, the goal was to learn old motorcycle mechanics. That was the mission. That was my goal. I wanted to learn to rebuild a Panhead engine myself and learn that. I felt like that was something that was becoming a dying art in being an American biker, and I wanted to help be part of preserving that from that generation. And I went to his place and we worked on that motorcycle till midnight or 1 in the morning, 3 nights a week for a year and a half before it was completely built the first time. And I learned so much from that guy. And he got invested in me making it through Hokahe on that bike. And he and I were in it together. We would brainstorm, we would come up with ideas of how to make things last longer. And he was one of the finest Harley-Davidson old mechanics that I know. And John Hall, that's his name, John Hall, he died in October. And, having been he was as much with me every stretch of the way for all 6 years that we've been working on making it through Hokahe on that motorcycle. Well, John died in October. And, I just felt cosmically that man was with me the whole way. It was a whole different deal. It was a passing of the torch. Everything that I wrenched on that motorcycle to make it through had John Hall's stamp on it. I didn't learn that by myself. I learned it from him. And, so he was very much with me, and I was cognizant of that every stretch of the way. Every time I came up with a solution to a problem that seemed temporarily, unassailable, that man had his imprint on it. It was because of John Hall. And so that was a big part of it. My mother-in-law passed away while I was on Hokahe. I didn't find out about it until almost I was in Canada. And, on her, she passed away on hospice. And on her deathbed, one of her dying wishes were that I not stop Hokahe. And,
Wow.
there were just a lot of family investments in it. There were a lot of people that were heavily invested in just, me and that old Pan making it across the finish line. And Alice, my mother-in-law, who I love dearly and miss desperately, that for her to have that thought on her deathbed just blows my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, JJ commented your broken handlebars are still up there in Alberta.
Oh, JJ's the parts broker that set the whole deal up. So 2J's was 2J's there was an indispensable part of the equation. So 2J's has a number of motorcycle shops up there, but 2J's can help me out and make sure I've got the motorcycle shops, ugly but honest motorcycles. And I think that's correct. Make sure I get corrected on that, 2J's, if I'm not. But 2J's really brokered the whole deal. 2J's set it all up and found the parts that we needed, risers and handlebars, and set up the space for us to do the repair in. So he was a big part of the equation for us to make it past that obstacle.
I don't know, you might have, it could have been you could have answered this, but I had one of my questions wrote down. What was your biggest drive to complete this?
I am a goal-oriented person in life. In my day-to-day life, I can be a dog on a bone. Once I get to chewing, it's hard to get off of it. When I get a task or a goal, then I'm trying to complete. And wrenching on a motorcycle and riding that motorcycle, those two things together are part of the experience to me. Have been since I built my first motorcycle when I was 11 years old, or I repaired my first motorcycle when I was 11 years old. That's probably the best way to put it. And wrenching on that motorcycle to, that idea of a person getting on the road was something that I did get it right. Ugly but honest motorcycles.
With some help from Northern Cycles.
Yeah. That experience of getting on the road and the machine that's between your legs it's you and the machine. And part of the intimate connection to the road comes from being a biker and being on the road on two wheels. There's a unique experience. I'm sure you would agree. There's a unique experience to being on a road and traveling to someplace on a motorcycle.
100%.
But the mechanical connection to you and your bike has a role to play with me in my heart. The challenge of, if the bike breaks down, then me and the bike are down. And we got to find a way to keep moving down the road together. And that old bike is a member of my family. That old bike and I have been a lot of places together. It's been a lot of my fabric of life for a number of years. And there are a number of very important relationships that have happened as a result of that motorcycle. So the mechanical challenge of getting down the road and keep moving down the road, that's the attraction to me. That's part of the attraction to me. So that's woven into the fiber of this.
Well, I can agree with that. I mean, I ride an older bike, not near where you're at. I mean, I got a 2004, but I got one saddlebag that, I have my small little tool bag, but then I have a separate socket set I carry. I carry, a jug of primary oil. I got some extra engine oil and transmission fluid, and it's that one saddlebag. And, I've had an instance where I broke down on the side of the road, but I had the tools to get the part off. And, some buddies went and got the part that I needed and were able to make the roadside repair. But, I mean, there's been countless trips where I didn't need it, but if I didn't have those tools with me, I would feel like something's not right. And I feel uncomfortable riding if I don't have them. It's that, to me, I call it that cheap bit of insurance, but it's just something that I always travel with, whether I need to fix something or maybe I can help another guy on the side of the road. I always travel with those tools in that saddlebag, and it's paid off once, but like I said, numerous times I didn't need them, but you know what? I have them, and I just don't feel right riding not having them.
Yeah, I can't go down the road without that toolkit on there, on that Panhead anyway.
Yeah.
Obviously. But my toolkit on the Panhead's a pretty refined. To tell you the truth, we talked about all the refinements on the bike, but that toolkit, that's about as refined as the engine is. All the little components that are in my tool bag have been hard fought. The things that you need on the road, from zip ties to vice grips, plus many other very specialized pieces of kit just for that Panhead have been as hard fought as getting the motorcycle set. Just with enough miles and enough experience, you eventually accumulate the right set of tools in that bag to get 75% of what you need done done on the road.
Well, for me, it's like I carry that socket set because years ago I was doing the front tire, and for me, it's like if I'm pulling the tire off, well, then I'm going to put new brakes on it because you got to pull the tire off calipers, and you got to have a 12-point quarter-inch socket.
Yeah.
We couldn't find it at my dad's shop. I called every parts store, nobody had it, so I ended up buying a complete little socket set because it had that quarter-inch 12-point. I'm like, well, fuck it. I bought it because I need it for this bike, so now this socket set is going to ride everywhere with me, and it does. All because I needed one socket, but oh well, now I have the whole set, and some other odds and ends in it. But you know what? It stays with it.
Yeah.
One of them deals. So what else did I have? I guess we should have started maybe this one at the beginning. What was the drive that made you want to attempt this challenge on the Panhead? How'd that whole start to wanting to do it on that vintage of a bike?
I had been at that point riding the Panhead long distance quite a bit. Certainly not anything close to a Hokahay, but a fair amount of long distance riding on the bike. And it just seemed that Hokahay fit, the specifications to me to, hold my beer and watch this, kind of experience. It was just that much of a challenge. I was like, hey, I'm going to, I love riding this old bike. I'm going to ride it in Hokahay. And like all experiences that you have like this in life, when you're doing something as extreme as Hokahay, there's a whole lot of naivete that goes into your first trial run, and that is certainly true on the Panhead. There were plenty of people that even to the end and third time is the charm told me it couldn't be done, so that first time was definitely a swing for the fences. And that was part of the attraction to me, I think. It hadn't been done at that point, so somebody had to try it. So, I had the right machine and the right mindset for it, I think, to start with, that I wasn't going to give up and keep persevering in the challenge. And I don't know how many more Hokahays I'd have in me on the Panhead. I turned 60 while I was leaving for Hokahay, but it's hard for me to let go of a goal like that and leave it undone. Yeah,
understandable. Yeah, doing it how you did is pretty freaking amazing, and not giving up after the first failed attempt, and 2 years later, you try again, didn't get it, and you come back a third year. It's like, fuck it, I'm going to do this, man. Like you said, hold my beer and watch this shit.
Yeah. Well, that second Hokahay, that was the ultimate, punch in the teeth, because literally I had 300 miles. I had spent 2 years rebuilding that motorcycle for 22. And I made it 300 miles before I blew my engine. And when I blew the engine I lost the Panhead on the first day. And it was just a punch in the teeth. And I finished that Hokahay on an Ultra Classic. I went back to the starting line, got on a different bike, and finished that Hokahay. At least I checked that box, but it just wasn't enough. It just felt like something left undone. And especially being out of the ride, out of the challenge on day one, it just beat me up for 2 years. And I have to mention, there's a really cool lady, Abby rode in Hokahay.
Abby Steed?
I think that's right. I think that's right. She rode a 53 Panhead in 22.
I met her at the 22 when I was there for the send off up at Black Hills Harley-Davidson, and saw hers. Was like, holy crap, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah, she made it 1,000 miles more than I did in 2020 when she rode it in 22. And it, she had 2 major repairs she had to do on the road, and ultimately had to leave the ride. But so I'm not the only one to try it on a vintage bike.
True. Takes a different mindset, and I think mentality as a rider to do it on that vintage. It says something about the individual and their heart and what it means to them. It's pretty damn amazing.
I think across the board, the riders that I've met through Hokahay and the riders that I've met through many different long distance riding communities, and the riders with Mile Monsters Inc., for example, and in my own club, Boost Fighters Motorcycle Club, they're the serious riders that really just, it's in their fiber of their being to ride a motorcycle, and to just the challenge comes from internal, from themselves. They have inspired me for so long, all of those riders, and Hokahay is just full of them. Hokahay, all of them are just inspirational, and
I agree.
So many Hokahay riders are just so amazing in what they've accomplished in their long distance riding history, and their Hokahay riding history. We had some riders this last time that have ridden every Hokahay. We had riders come back that had ridden the original Hokahay and came back because this was the original route. I mean, that just blows my mind. Just staggering.
Oh, I get. I mean, through the going on almost 4 years now of doing this, has really opened my eyes, and I've learned so much from so many people. Every milepost to me has been an education. I mean, I grew up around motorcycles my entire life. I can remember, God, I was 10, 11 years old when my stepdad brought home his 74 Shovelhead. It was in like 13 boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And then like 3 weeks later, down the road it goes. And, growing up around, motorcycles and all the activities, whatnot it has, it puts you in a different mindset in a way. And you get out on the road and you're riding, and, you're in the wind, and it's hard to put into words how it feels. The spiritual part behind it, the meaning, and just really enjoying it, and just understanding that the camaraderie within that motorcycle community it's one of those things that's hard to put into words for people that don't ride. It's like, how do you explain it? Well, it's hard.
You're right. I mean, I have yet to run into anybody whose spirit is invested in riding a motorcycle. I don't care what motorcycle you're riding. If you're on 2 wheels on the road, it doesn't matter to me. I have been so humbled and so inspired by so many people along the way, that, if you're putting in the investment, not just in treasure, but I'm talking about investment in spirit, to be on the road with 2 wheels. There are 1,000 ways to do something epic on a motorcycle. 1,000. I mean, there's so many ways to ride a motorcycle, from dirt track and motocross and hill climbers and ice racers, and you just go down the line, and people find new ways on a motorcycle all the time to do something inspirational and amazing to me. And I've been inspired by all of them, whether it's mechanics or long distance riders or dirt track riders or racers or drag racers. all of those, there's 1,000 ways to do something amazing and inspirational on a motorcycle. And I just love that part of it, how individually we can put a stamp on our motorcycle experience. There's no end to creativity there.
I think, T said it right. My Hoka brother, if anyone doesn't have the utmost respect for you and your ride this year, they don't get the spirit of what it takes to ride. Hoka Hey 1174 or 1164, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That's humbling and it's really humbling, because anybody that made it through this Hoka Hey, period, full stop. If you rode this Hoka Hey, you really should, you're a legend in my mind, because it was something astronomically epic in long distance riding and in Hoka Hey history also. It's such a unique route, and what an amazing route we rode this year. And anybody that brought that motorcycle all the way through that, just awesome. This is also one of the first years that I've seen in some time that we didn't lose any life on Hoka Hey, which is amazing.
That is true.
So thankful for that.
We get back to, you talk about, the spirit of riding and, trying to explain to other people. I can think back to how many times where you're off the beaten path, running these side highways, you pull up to a little gas station, whether it's one pump, two pump, what it be in the middle of nowhere. And, some old timer does, bib overhauls, getting fuel and looks at the bike, and you break into story because at one point, he had a bike ride, and that 1 minute fuel stop just turned into 10 minutes because you made a new friend, and you're hearing stories of, his adventures, and you end up, making a friendship and getting a bit of an education at the same time, because having a motorcycle sparked a common ground with that individual. And I've experienced that a few times, and it is so amazing, and it's an awesome experience.
Oh, absolutely. I had one time I was talking to an old guy, and he was in his 80s, and he looked at my boots, and he looked at me and he said, "You ride a Panhead, don't you?" And it just blew my mind. He didn't know I rode a motorcycle. He didn't know I did anything with a motorcycle. But he looked at my shoes and said, "You ride a Panhead." I said, "How do you know that?" And he said, "You ride a suicide clutch. That's the only thing that does that to your right boot like that. It's called a Panhead toe." And that's true. Because you're riding a suicide clutch, you always have to cheat to the right. Because if you fall to the left, that's why they call it a suicide. So you can't fall to the left because your foot's on the clutch, and you eat your primary up. You'll crash. But so you're always cheating to the right. So when you start off and you let your clutch up, you drag the inside of your toe on your right boot. And that's the only place that's worn off on your boot. And he knew that just by looking at my feet. Just an old biker, amazing.
Or, you come across the old flat track guys that still wear, the steel boot underneath, the steel pad underneath their boots for flat track, and so they don't tear up their boots. They're running the steel slide on their boots on the right or left foot, excuse me.
Yep.
Yeah, it's little things that, guys that understood or that, have lived the life or whatnot, that understand the stuff, that can look at one little detail and know exactly what you do in a way. Which is pretty damn freaking amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
That itself is the coolest story. I got to agree with Jason just commented, man. That was such a cool story. When somebody can notice the smallest detail, but knows what you're doing or what you're riding just because of the littlest detail, because they've been there and they understand it.
I have many people I come across, that are, have some age under their belt, because I work with them on a routine basis, and I you you can't ever take the biker out of a person, man or woman. I've had men and women talk to me about how much how much nostalgia they have for their younger years riding a motorcycle, and they I cherish that. That motorcycle is like a that Panhead also, I've had a lot of relationships with people because of that Panhead, knowledge wise, but just on the road, the number of people that will stop and look at that Panhead and want to talk to you just because you're riding that old bike. And it just sparks their nostalgic juices and makes them remember those days when they were doing the same thing, riding their favorite motorcycle and tearing the road up on a bike back in the day. And that motorcycle is like a passport to uh, you know bringing them to you
Memories.
and talking about those memories. Yeah, I love that part of it. I love that part of it on the road. You know,
I remember, I can't remember where I'd met an old timer guy, ridden motorcycles whole life. And I want to say he was from Southern California. He was one of the first motorcycle units where he lived. And I think they'd got the old shovels. He's like, it just wasn't enough horsepower. And he goes, I ride my whole life. So him and a couple of the guys' department that were the first motor units on a weekend pulled out and, swapped the cams for a little bit more. Well, when they had to have their services done, they knew that those would, he said, from his story he was telling me, because they would check that stuff, check the, the lobes and whatnot. He goes, we would go on the weekend, pull out the cams they put in, put the stock ones back in. He goes, yeah, the department was always amazed at how all those cams just never seemed to age with all the miles they had on those bikes. It's like, man, these original cams are doing awesome. He goes, little they know, he goes, we'd change them out after they'd service the bikes. I just laughed. I was like, that's good.
yeah,
Just made me chuckle. And it's those kind of stories that it's just, like you said, it's just neat to hear.
yeah,
And, you can get that camaraderie and that relationship and just, hear those old stories and live vicariously through them in a way.
absolutely.
Well, Hyde, this has been an absolute blast, man. I can't thank you enough for coming back and talking about this adventure. I know I've been looking forward to this since, we chatted, after you finished. Like you said, you had so much to get caught up on after taking that much time off, but I can't thank you enough for coming back and sharing this adventure, because it was truly an awesome adventure, and I'm honored to be able to share this with everybody else. It's really means a lot to me, and I can't thank you enough.
Denver, thank you so much for the time. This was really my first chance to sort of rehash Hokahay after we got back to Texas, and really my first chance to talk about it a little bit. And so thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much for everything you do. Thank you for everybody that joined us, and all you Hokahay riders out there. Great job.
Absolutely. I mean, finishing is awesome to, get that under your belt to be a finisher in that. And like I said, but I know there's been some other people that have, we've chatted and messages, but it's like a lot of people feel there needs to be that little asterisk by your name, because you finish on another level, and on doing it on the old Panhead is pretty goddamn amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And it was a lot of fun following him, man. And so thank you so much for sharing. I greatly appreciate it. And this has been the most fun I've had in a long time doing a milepost is hearing this story. Because like I said, I've been looking so forward to it. And even my wife, she's like, you need to start making notes. She goes, because you're going to forget stuff. So start writing it down now. And, she's been on me for weeks, and it's been a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed it. And I can't thank you enough for your time.
Oh, same here. Thank you, Denver.
Sweet. So, hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We'll be back with Milepost 140 coming soon. So, hey, until then, man, ride safe, have fun, enjoy them roads, and we'll catch you in the crossroads.